Hello there! Thanks for joining me for the 5th installment of Let's Review All the Final Fantasies. Today, we're looking at Final Fantasy Legend 2 for the Game Boy. Final Fantasy Legend 2 was released December 14th, 1990. Just like the first Final Fantasy Legend, it's no longer considered a Final Fantasy game. In fact, it was released as Saga 2: The Treasure Legend in Japan. Not as awesome of a name as Saga 1, which carries the subtitle Hell Tower Warrior. I'm a little surprised that they managed to put this game out only 1 year after releasing the Final Fantasy Legend, the first one. The first Final Fantasy game, period, was released in 1987. That means that Square released 5 Final Fantasy games in 3 years. That's not including the 6 other not Final Fantasy games either. It's hard to imagine what this kind of release cycle would look like now, considering it took them nearly 10 years to finish Final Fantasy XV. But I digress. Mechanically, Final Fantasy Legend 2 plays very similarly to the first one. There are some key changes though. You still build a party of 4. This time you still have the humans, mutants, and various monsters, but now they've added robots. Monsters still change and grow through the consumption of flesh dropped by the enemies you meet in battle. Mutants still grow based on the actions taken in battle, with a little bit more randomness thrown in. And humans still grow through the use of consumables, though now there's a limited number of those consumables in the world. And humans also grow from the actions taken in battle like mutants. The key difference in how humans and mutants grow is that some stats will grow faster for one group over the other, i.e. mana and defense grow faster for mutants, and strength grows faster for humans. The brand new robots grow their stats based on what they have equipped. I quickly realized that if I stacked my robot with nothing but agility weapons like bows, it meant that I could run from almost all random encounters and my robot would almost always be the first in the turn order. Robots are also strange in how they use equipable items. The robots only get half of the standard uses from weapons, but when you heal at an inn, those uses are restored. Just make sure the use counter never reaches 0, making them more like spells. Another big change is party resurrection. In the first Final Fantasy Legend game, you could only resurrect your party member 3 times, and then you had to pay 10,000 gold to buy another opportunity to resurrect them. If you didn't want to resurrect a party member, you could always recruit a new level 1 party member. To make things nicer for the player, at the expense of a small amount of playstyle flexibility, you now don't need to resurrect a party member ever. If a party member reaches 0 HP during a battle, and you run away or kill all the enemies, the downed party members auto-magically return to 1 health point. This change makes the game flow better, and there's the added bonus that if any party member is at 1 HP, it's treated as if they have max agility when the run command is selected. If the whole party gets killed, you can be resurrected by Odin, if you promise to fight him later, and you'll be brought back to the fight that you lost. It's a neat idea, but it's wasted in a game where you can save anywhere and everywhere. The random battle system is almost completely unchanged, and that's not a bad thing. I had no complaints about the battle system that didn't stem from my own incompetence. The battle system is a turn-based affair where you see the enemies in a pseudo first-person view, and the sprites for the enemies only represent what kind of enemy it is, not how many there are. All the other changes are changes to the flavor of the game. You might not even notice anything has changed. Final Fantasy Legend 2 opens up with you being awoken by your father. He tells you that he has to leave, gives you a magi, and promptly jumps out the window. Some number of years later, at the breakfast table, you tell your mother that you're going to go leave to find dear old dad. Your classmates join you on your quest. You quickly discover that in order to progress through the game, you need to collect the Magi. magical artifacts that are said to give the holder the power of the gods. There are 77 magi for you to collect, but fear not, you collect 4 to 6 at a time. In fact, Venus's world has 17 in it in total. You'll often find these magi being held by powerful individuals who claim to be the new gods. Throughout your adventures, you run into your father a couple times. Often he's poorly disguised. Eventually, you find out that Dad is the captain of a band of rebels fighting against the new gods and trying to keep the remaining magi out of their hands. This time around, you're not traversing up through some interdimensional world tower. You're traveling through the branches of Yggdrasil, the interdimensional tree connecting all the worlds. Once you get to the end, you find that Apollo, the only new god who was nice to you, is actually a big jerk and forces you to hand over the magi you've collected by holding all your friends and family hostage. Mr. "I'ma jump out this window and abandon my family" Pops tells you that there's a secret 78th magi and joins your party to find it and defeat Apollo. If you survive the fight with Apollo, Bad Dad sacrifices himself to save you. Not willing to put up with his abandonment again, you decide to use all the magi to resurrect him. But the old god Isis shows up and asks for your help. After helping Isis through her bullshit, you go back home to Mom. The ending actually made me chuckle a little. Your dad wakes you up again and tells you that he has to leave again. Well, you ain't having none of that shit and tell him you're coming with. Then Mom bursts in and says, "Forget that noise, I'm coming too. Oh yeah, don't jump out the window this time." Final thoughts time. I will be giving a few pointers at the end of the video for those that are interested. Overall, I enjoyed Final Fantasy Legend 2. It's not as groundbreaking as the first Legend game. On the other hand, the mechanical changes make an overall positive difference. You don't wander for too long, even if there are a couple sections where you will wander around. In the first game, the story bits made your characters look like amoral mercenaries who would gladly trade a young woman for a piece of a statue. Here, your characters are freeing people from despotic and capricious gods. It also acts as a doubling down on the end of Final Fantasy Legend 1, where you angrily kill God and go back home to the quiet life. If you're a fan of classic JRPGs and all the trappings that they include, then Final Fantasy Legend 2 is worth seeking out and playing. This isn't a perfect game though. Many of the dungeons have stupidly high encounter rates. I'm talking not being able to move more than 3 steps between random encounters. There are many cases of Square making the dungeons and locations visually unique and interesting, but there are many failed attempts at this too. The failures are just nausea-inducing mess that make the screen confusing. There's a massive difficulty spike towards the end too. I was cruising along, doing fine, beating the random encounters just fine. The boss was a struggle, but I made it. Then, BAM! I couldn't get through a random encounter without losing at least one party member. And I couldn't run away from any of these encounters, even though my robot had his agility maxed out. This happened even after I cheated the encounter table and leveling system to raise my strength and mana to much higher levels. Look up the method if you're interested, it's barely worth the time. In the rankings, I'm putting Final Fantasy Legend 2 at the top of the list. I know I don't sound as excited about Legend 2 as I was about Legend 1, but the quality is higher, the whole game flows better, and it keeps enough of its challenge and flexibility to make returning to it worth your time, but it isn't as hair-pulling in its mechanical difficulties. If you're interested in playing Final Fantasy Legend 2, it had its original release in 1990, but also had a re-release in 1998. Strangely enough, it's the same exact game down to the ROM code. This means that there are a ton of copies available, and the game goes for about $15 for a loose cartridge. Square Enix did remake Final Fantasy Legend 2 for the DS in 2009, but it wasn't released outside of Japan, and unlike their PSP remake of Final Fantasy III, it doesn't include the English translation. I tried to find a virtual console release, but it doesn't appear to have happened. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you'll join me next time for Final Fantasy Adventure on the Game Boy. If you want to watch the other videos in this series, please click the eye icon up here to see the playlist. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Over and out, Watcher 6. Here's some quick thoughts and hints for you. Pay attention to the magi you collect. I didn't realize until towards the end that I had a magi that allowed me to teleport to other worlds. This fast travel magi is called Pegasus. and you pick it up quite early on. Here we have a 1990 Game Boy game with fast travel. I guess there really isn't anything new anymore, huh? Some of the NPCs won't repeat the key information they give you, so don't go forgetting their advice or instructions. When you get to Venus's world, keep going back and talking to the girl whose fiancé was kicked out of the city for being ugly. A story trigger is hidden behind some of her dialogue. Explore all over the nasty dungeon. I know it's nasty, it's in the name, but some of the best gear is hidden throughout its nooks and crannies. It'll be worth your time. What are you doing? Just sniffing shit, huh?